If you are wanting to learn how to design your own lures for 3D printing, if you want to learn how to 3D print those lures, if you want to know how to build those lures for fishing so that you can get out and catch fish on lures that you design, then I'm glad that you have joined us. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to start from zero. We're going to design this lure that's right here in front of us. And then towards the end of the video, I'm going to show you how you can take your own two-dimensional blueprints and put them into Blender and create those, or how you can take, I'm going to give you some screenshots of this one so that you can copy it into Blender and follow along. Let's get into that. Okay, so now that we're in Blender, let's go to File and Save As. Let's save our blank document. Let's create a new folder and let's call it lure. Call it whatever you want. Let's call it lure, and in there we're gonna call this lure and hit save as. Okay, the first thing you're gonna want to do is establish the overall dimensions of your lure. Let's make this one 4 inches long. So we're going to hold Shift A, go to Mesh, go to Cube. It's going to be huge, right? So don't worry about that. Hit S. Actually, don't. No. Go to Item. And right here, the axis that we are working on for length is X, which is the red axis. So make sure up here that you are looking down the y-axis. Y will be our width. So click on Y, the positive Y, not the negative Y. Click on positive Y. And then for the size of our cube, make sure your cube is selected here. Along the X dimension, we're going to make it 4 inches. I'm going to tab down. Y is going to be our width. Let's go with 0.75, which is 3/4 of an inch. You could also just put in 3 divided by 4, right? And then for our height, I want 1.5 inches. So what we're going to use this cube for is going to be our outer dimensions. If you already have a lure in mind that you've drawn out on paper, two-dimensional, determine your overall length, your overall height, and what width you want it to be. Make it like that. We're going to use this basically like a frame. And then you're going to want to go to this little orange box that says Object. You're going to scroll down to Viewport Display, and then Display as Wire. Over here on the right hand side, my panels are going to be set up differently than how yours are, I imagine. If you haven't seen my previous video on Blender tips for newbies, I think is what I had called it. It shows how you can lay this out any way you want. This is the way that I prefer to have it. We're going to be working in inches, so have your unit system as imperial. Your length is inches. You can find that in the little tab here called Scene. I like my next one to be my modifiers, which is the blue wrench. And the bottom one here, I like my object window. Okay, so we've made it wire so that it looks like this. Go back to Y. We're going to add in another cube. Shift A, Mesh, Cube. Give it the same dimensions. 4 inches, 0.75 inches, 1.5 inches. And then hit Tab to get into the edit mode. That gives you these vertices. So if you don't see these little vertices, then you are not in edit mode. So this is object mode, this is edit mode. We want to be in edit mode. We're going to hit Control R to add some loop cuts along here. Loop cuts is just adding more sections. We're going to add 5. So that's going to give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections here. Click it. And then the next thing it's going to do is going to give you the option to move this around. We don't want to move it. We're just going to leave it in its normal location. So hit escape and it will evenly split it among there. I like to do 6 because really I want to break the lure down into thirds. This is the front third, this is the middle third, and this is the rear third. This line separates those thirds, and this line separates these thirds, and then the other lines in between there, that half a third, that half of a third, those are to give us a little more control on how we're going to modify the lure. Tab back out into object mode, go to add modifier, generate, and we're going to do subdivision surface, and this is going to make our cube into kind of a round shape. You're going to want to look at levels of the viewport here, and the more you turn this up, the more resolution it's going to have. So it's going to take it from this kind of low poly shape into something that's got more faces on it. When we go to print, we'll probably crank this up to like 6. You can see if your object is white, you'll see that mine is gray. That's because I have up here is this X-ray mode. It's Alt Z. This allows me to see through it. So if yours looks like this, that's okay for now. In a little bit, we're going to need to change it to look like that. Either way, don't go too far to the right. Depending on how powerful your GPU is or your CPU is, or how much memory you have, you may be able to go way to the right, but I'm operating on a dinosaur and it doesn't really work very well when it comes to that stuff. So I'm going to put it at 4 for now. We can always come back and change it. Minimize this because we're going to add more things here. So go back over here, click on, let's rename this, hit F2. I'm going to call this frame. We're going to get more things here and it's going to be getting crazy. F2, I'm going to call this master. Okay, so we're clicked on master. We're going to tab back into edit mode. You see we have these vertices, and that gives us the ability to select these, and then we can move them around. But since this is not see-through, we're not in X-ray mode. It's not grabbing all the vertices. See, it's not grabbing that one back there. If we have it now in X-ray mode, it will select the vertices that are behind it. So it's important to have it in X-ray mode. The other important thing is as we go, we want to have the lure as symmetrical as possible along the y-axis. If we move this, we want the same thing to be happening on the opposite side of that axis. So we can make that easy by tabbing back into object mode, go to edit, go to auto mirror. If you don't have this here, then you're missing a plugin. You're gonna need to go back to my earlier video where I show plugins that you're gonna want for Blender. So at auto mirror, you can do this through here. This is just much simpler. So anyway, we're gonna do it along the y-axis. Auto mirror. Now, you'll see it has cut this in half, and it only lets us edit one side. And if we go back to select this and select this, now whatever we do on one side is mirrored to the other. All right. So we've got our cube. We've given it its dimensions that match our frame. We've split it into the loop cuts of 6. We've given our auto mirror, and we have it in X-ray mode. So select this guy. We're going to hit S to scale, and we're going to constrain it to the Z axis, which is blue. Right now we're only worried about doing anything up and down. So S to scale, Z to constrain it, and move this guy in. And you can make it as small as you want. You could even go too far, right? You don't want to make it too sharp, because what you'll find when you're applying epoxy, if you've got a real sharp edge there, epoxy has a hard time staying on these sharp surfaces. The surface tension wants to pull the epoxy later, whenever we're finishing the lure, wants to pull the epoxy away from like real sharp edges. That has a little bit of a curve, so it may be okay, but I like to have a little bit more roundness. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo. Okay, so again, we're going to select these. We're going to hit S to scale, Z to constrain it along the Z axis, and just get something that looks, I mean, maybe you want a real round nose, maybe you want a little pointy nose, whatever you like there. That's fine. We can come back and change it again later. We're going to do the same thing on the tail. Select those, hit S to scale, and Z, constrain it to the Z axis, and get you something like this. Two things that we want to add that I forgot. We're going to need some, maybe some references. The ballast that we're going to use for this, and we'll go into that in depth later, but we're going to use some size 3 split shot to ballast this, and the size 3 split shot is roughly 0.33 in diameter. So we're going to hit Shift A, go to Mesh, go to UV Sphere. Again, it's huge. It blows it up, right? Over here, make sure your segments are something like this. I'll bring this down smaller. Let's give it maybe a ½ inch radius so you can see. Oops. Let's go a little bigger. Okay, so if the number you have is like this, again, you'll see how low poly it is. We want to crank this number up. Segments, I usually like to have twice as many segments as rings. If you wanted to do 32 and 16, that gets you pretty round. If you wanted to go higher than that, you can, but you remember, the more faces you add, the more processing power it's going to be taxing on your graphics card or on your CPU. But you could pump this number up to 64 and 32, and it's just going to continue to make it rounder and rounder. If we wanted to go 128 and 64, you get the example. But 32 and 16, I find a good compromise. This does determine the radius, but we're going to change this. So let's go to item. Like I said, they're 0.33 in diameter, so 1/3 of an inch. Let's put 0.33, 0.33, 0.33. So we're going to be using this as ballast. I'm going to move it just kind of down here at the bottom, so that we'll know so that we don't make this too narrow. And then the same thing back here. We're going to have a hook hanging off the tail, and we're going to need a line tie to go here. So I don't want to make this so small that my line tie is not going to fit in there. So I'm going to add a cylinder. Shift A, Mesh, and we're going to go to Cylinder. Same thing. Let's crank this radius down to 2 so you can get a picture of it. Same idea. You want the vertices. I put 32. You see it kind of. Let's see. If you preferred it to be higher poly, you could crank this number up. It would look like that, but 32 is fine. And the depth, I usually go at 1.5 inches for the depth of my hook hangers. And we want a diameter of about 1/10 of an inch. 0.1 radius is half of diameter, so we're going to go 0.05. Okay, so now you see this guy, and if you're on the item tab, you'll see that along the x-axis it is 0.1 inches, along the y-axis it is 0.1 inches, and the overall height is 1.5 inches. We're going to rotate that, so we're going to hit, make sure our cylinder is selected. We're going to hit R to rotate, and we're going to rotate it 90 degrees, just like that. Hit G to grab, put it over here. It doesn't got to be in the, this isn't where it's going to end up. This is not the final spot. We just want to kind of get an idea for our tail size. So let's go back to X-ray mode and tab back in. Across the top, I want a shallow curve, and across the bottom, we want a deep curve here, and it's going to go shallow on the backside. You like to have I like to have the tallest and widest point at about a third of the way back. That's why it's important that we have this here. So what we want to do is start moving these vertices down as we work on the top. So G to grab, we're going to move it along the Z. You can move it wherever you want, but I like to keep the symmetry. I like to keep the loops spread out evenly, so hit Z and just leave it on there. And select this one, G to grab, move it along the Z. G to grab, move it along the Z. We're going to skip this guy. G to grab, move it along the Z. Now, as you find something that you like, you'll see that we're missing our mark here. I'm going to hit G. You could leave it where it's at, but I'm going to hit G, Z. I'll go ahead and move it back up a little bit. I like to keep this as my widest point. So that looks pretty good. Again, here we want this one to be the widest point, so these three we're going to move backwards. Move up. G to grab, Z, go up. And we're starting to get a lure shape here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to tab out just to look at it here for a minute. I'm going to switch back out of X-ray mode. I think I'm going to move the tail up. The nose, I don't like to have a real high nose. I like to have the nose along center line and maybe a little lower. So I'm probably going to leave that there. If not, I might move it down a little bit. Let's tap back into edit mode. I'm going to turn my X-ray back on. So let's just grab all of this. Let's grab all that. G, Z. Let's move it up. We don't want to go too far. Let's get a little more localized. Let's see about just moving these smaller sections. Okay, I think I like that. Let's grab our cylinder here and put it back in its place. Again, now that we've got a few extra things in our scene, let's go ahead and clean this up. As we go, we're going to add more items. So this cylinder, let's call it line tie dot rear. I like to keep a naming convention where the group of objects is first. So we will have a forward line tie, a mid line tie, and an aft line tie. This sorts them alphabetically. So if we put line tie first, then it will group all the line ties together. And this little guy, let's call it ballast. Okay. Now, let's go back in. I want to move this down a little bit. G to grab, Z. That's probably about right. Now the next thing we're going to move to the face. So the X moves us to the front of the lure, and we're going to be looking back. So hit X, not positive X, but X, and select our master, tab in, and I'm going to rotate this a little bit. I hold the middle mouse button, kind of pan over. What I want to grab is I want to grab this line that runs along the bottom. You can hold down Alt and click on a line in the middle, not a vertice. Click on the line, it'll grab that. So let's go back to our front view. I'm gonna hit G to grab. This time I'm gonna move it along the Y axis, which is that yellow line or the green axis. I'm gonna move it in a little bit. We don't want to go too far. You see we've got our ballast there as reference. We want to keep it there and get a little bit more so we have some wall for our filament or our resin. Wall for our material. Now the only other one we have right now is this line at the top. And what I would really like to do is I would like to widen up right around here and leave the top where it's at. So what we're going to do, you can do this from the front view, but I'm going to rotate a little bit just to show you what we're doing. Move this guy back. Let's hold down Shift and the middle mouse button. I'm going to hit Control R again to add some loop cuts. You don't want to add them this way. You want to add them here along the center line. One might work for us, but we're going to add two. And then click, or you can hit Enter. Again, it gives you the option to move. We're going to hit Escape. And go back to our, well, let's select this top one. Let's Alt, hold down Alt, and then click it. Go back to our front view. Now I'm going to be moving these vertices, but I'm going to be looking over here because it's a lot cleaner. So I'm going to hold down G, move it along the Y axis. So I want to get it about up to the width of my lure. And I'm going to pan back, hold down Alt. I'm going to grab this top one here. Go back to my front view, G to grab, constrain it along the Y. Bring it in a little bit. And we're just going to have a little dance here of, you know, back and forth doing that. And just till we get exactly what it is that we want. Every now and then I'll tab out back into object mode so the vertices disappear. A little cleaner what I'm looking at. Ignore these little yellow lines. That's just how it's we're in X-ray mode. If you turn it off, you won't see them. Let's see if this guy does anything for us here. G to grab, Y. Let's just leave it where it was. But you'll notice that now, I'm sorry, now this has gotten a little wider down here than what I would like. So grab that again. G to grab, Y, bring it in a little bit. Let's zoom out. Let's take a look at what we're working with. I think I'm liking it. It's all just a song and dance, right? I mean, we're playing, we're learning. Go back to our front view. Maybe you want this to be a little more rounded. Maybe you want this a little wider. You're going to want your top, the top of your lure, top half of your lure to be wider than the bottom half. Sometimes you're even going to want this to be sharper, but making our first lure, we're going to do this easy. Having the top half of your lure wider creates more buoyancy up here. If we had moved this in and made it something funky like that, we wouldn't have a lot of material up there. We wouldn't have a lot of air pocket. We wouldn't have a lot of buoyancy. And maybe that makes sense at sometimes, some applications, but it's not going to make sense on this one. So we've got our front, something that's tidied up and workable. We have our side view that's something that's tidied up and workable. We're going to come back and change this a little bit. As you add loop cuts, it's going to change your visible geometry a little bit. That's okay. So let's go hit Z to look at the top view now. We're going to get the top view in order. So you should be seeing something that is consistent all the way across here. If what you're seeing right now, you know, looks kind of like this, then something went wrong along the way. And you may want to kill it and start over. Or you could undo. So I'm going to hit Control Z and undo. Get us back to work. This is what it should be looking at now that we're at the top view. Tab back into edit mode. Let's focus on our nose. So you can hit G to grab. And we're going to continue to constrain along the Y-axis. Move this guy down. Again, we want this point to be our widest point. So it's going to kind of round here and then taper down in a traditional kind of aerodynamic looking shape. So let's grab this, G, Y. Let's move it down. We want it to be pretty narrow. We don't want it to be so narrow that it's undercutting our ability to make a hole there. Something like that will be good. And leaving this guy here, let's slowly work these other three into a shape that we like. I might actually just leave that guy where it's at. Do we want to make this more blunt? Do we want to leave it kind of flat? I think I'm just going to leave it where it's at. Let's go with what we got. Okay. Turn our X-ray mode off for a moment here. Let's click our middle mouse button. Spin this guy around. Okay. So let's go back over to our front. Remember, positive Y is the side that we're gonna mostly be working from. Negative Y it does give you a view here, but we're looking at the other side. And since we are in mirror, we're mirroring this. If you're on negative Y, you're not touching that side. So let's go back to this side where all the vertices are. Let's clean this up a little bit. S, Z, made a mistake. I'll show you something. Since I don't have it in X-ray mode, it only grabbed those front vertices. I'm going to scale them down. I'm going to show you. This is a mistake. See, it didn't grab those back ones. So it only scaled these guys, which is not what I wanted it to do. Control Z to undo. We all make mistakes. That's okay. Just, you know, as you get better and you go along, you'll realize them as you're making them. Maybe eventually I just won't make them, but you know, I'm human. Okay. S to scale, Z. Maybe I'm going to move these back a little bit. Maybe. Let's try it. G. We're going to move it along the x-axis. Why did you not grab that one behind you? G. X. There it goes. Okay. I think I like that. And we've got a lure shape. So with what we have here, let's check the volume. Oh, something I'm seeing. If you see this on the right hand side, this is the mirror modifier that we created earlier by going to edit and then clicking on this. Sometimes this merge can create a problem. So what that is, let me explain these to you real quick. Usually I'll see it in the tail. So let's turn our X-ray off. You would tab out. Right here where it gets real thin, your vertices start getting close together. If they're too close, they will merge. If they're this close, if they're 300s, 39 thousandths within each other, they will merge together. That might be what you want, but it might not be what you want. So I'm going to show you what it looks like, so that if you see it, you may just want it really close, but not actually merging together. We didn't see it there. So what you'll sometimes see, maybe don't do this on yours. I'm gonna hit a button here. Let's move it out a little bit. Don't do this on yours. Oh, I gotta tab out. Stay with me for a second. Okay, it didn't happen. Well, sometimes what'll happen once you get to a point where you're removing, oh, I removed the wrong one. When you remove that mirror modifier, sometimes it'll create an ugly seam here. So if you see an ugly seam, once you turn off your mirror modifier or you finalize it, if you see an ugly seam right along the middle, where that mirror line was, it's usually caused by merge. Some of the vertices were too close together, so close together that it created a problem. The other thing you'll see there is clipping. You're going to usually want clipping on, or you might always want clipping on. What it does is if you're grabbing a vertex that's on the line, grab that bad boy. It won't let you move it. It constrains it to that line. And if you had grabbed one that was off of the line, oh, my blender's going slow. This happens. Usually it's if you have too many undo steps, undo history, you can increase this step. If you want to have 50 undo history saved, 50 undos saved, or you can have as 5, you can have 10. If it starts slowing down, it's because this is consuming memory. And what's best is to save it and close it and reopen it, and it'll refresh. And that's what I'm going to do here in a second after I show you this. So I was showing you the point of clipping. If I hit G and I move it close to there, it's gonna hold it. Okay, hit escape. Anywho, that was, I wouldn't say useless or pointless because we learned something, but I think I might want to actually narrow this up a little bit. Let's look at that top view again. Oops. Yeah, I think I want to narrow this up just a smidge. I'm going to grab this G and Y axis. I'm just moving this vertex because the other ones were already so, that was the only one that was like way outside. And I think I like that better. Yeah, I think I like that better. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save. I'm going to close this. I'm going to reopen it just to free up some memory. Okay, I'm back in it. We've got a lure shape that we're happy with. And we have this called master. I want to keep this. I don't want to change it too much. I want this to be available. We're going to start making some changes to it, but I want an original copy in case we need to delete, in case we do something that just can't be undone. So this is going to be kind of our archive. What I want to do is I want to hit with my mouse here in the viewport window. I want to hit Shift and D, and it's created a copy. If you look up there in the right hand corner where the names of all the items are, you see a master.001, and that is this guy. When you hit Shift D, it automatically grabs it. It creates a duplicate, it grabs it, and then it lets you move it to where you want to move it to. But I don't want to move it anywhere. I want to keep it exactly where it was. So I'm going to hit Escape. So it is there. Over here where this little eyeball is, I'm going to hide our original master. And this guy, I'm going to turn off the mirror modifier. Not turn it off. I want to keep it. I want to apply it. So to apply it, you can either hit this little down arrow and hit apply, or you can hit Control A. If you do Control A in the viewport display, it's not going to close it. It's whatever modifier you are hovered over, it's going to close it. So I'm going to hit hover over this one. I'm going to hit Control A to close it. Sorry, apply it, not close it. So now, if we tab back in, now we've got all this geometry. And you know what? Now that I see this, I think I want to move these two in a little bit. I'm going to narrow my nose just a hair right here. So I've selected one vertex on each side. I'm going to hit S to scale, and I'm going to scale along the Y-axis. Yeah, that looks better. Cool. Okay. You know, I'm not an expert at Blender. I'm not an expert at making lures either, and I don't want you to think that I am. I'm not pretending to be. I'm just a regular guy in my 40s who likes to play around in here, and you know, we make mistakes and we figure out new ways to do things. We figure out how to correct those mistakes. Anybody can do this. You can do this. If I can do it, you can do it. It's just kind of hitting buttons and seeing what happens, you know. So the next thing we want is our volume. And in order to make the life of dealing with volume easier, we want to be in centimeters. You want your volume to be measured in centimeters. So we're going to unit system, put to metric, length to centimeters. We go to 3D print right here. Again, if you don't have that tab, you can go to one of my earlier videos about Blender add-ons. Blender add-ons for 3D printing and 3D modeling. You hit volume, it's going to tell us what it is. So it's 34.9 centimeters cubed, or 34.9 cubic centimeters. 28 cubic centimeters, 28 grams is an ounce. So cubic centimeters equals the same as grams in weight. 1 cubic centimeter of water is equal to roughly a gram. That's something we'll get into in another video. If you're not aware of it, if you're a lure maker, or you're interested in lure making, that's something we're going to have to learn, is volume, and it displaces water and how that affects flotation or sinking. But the weight of our lure, I want it to be about an ounce. And if I put 28 grams, which is an ounce of lead, or worth of hardware and lead, into this body, is going to float, because it's going to need 34.9 or more grams of weight in order to sink this volume. So this really cool feature here is I want to keep all my proportions the same, but I want to bring it down to an ounce. You could work with what you got here. This is I don't know, probably like 1.15 ounces or so. Let's see, 28 grams, which is 1 ounce divided by 34.9. No, I did that math wrong. There we go. Okay, so this is 1.25 ounces. But I don't want a lure that big. If you want a lure that big, you can stick with what you got. But I want to bring it down. So I'm going to scale to volume. I'm going to change this number to 28. I want 28 cubic centimeters. Boom. Look at that. Now our lure isn't as long. It's not as tall. Maybe it's lost a little bit of width. That's okay. We'll leave that. No, we don't need that anymore. We'll close this one for now. Okay. Line tie placement. Right click while you have your master 001 selected. This little orange dot is the origin. I call it the origin point. The red and white circle is the 3D cursor. The orange dot is the origin point. What I like to do, I'm going to right click and go to set origin to center of mass volume. Now this isn't perfect, but it gets you pretty close to getting where that point of balance is going to be. So in order to establish our line tie, we want to cut this in half. Wherever, if your line tie is right here or your line tie is right here, there's going to need to be a straight line from that position, a straight line all the way through to the furthest point of your lure, and it needs to have equal area on top, equal area on bottom, because again, symmetry is important in lure making. If you've got more area on the bottom half, there's more drag on the bottom half, your lure is going to eventually blow out and go up on its side or whatever as you're reeling it in. So this part is going to get a little fancy, so bear with me. Click off of our master, hit Control A. We're going to add another cube. Again, it's huge. Hit S to scale. Bring it down where it's just a little bit bigger than our lure. Turn on our X-ray mode. Yeah, something like that. Along the Z axis, we're going to shrink it just along the Z. So S to scale. See, this doesn't need to be perfect. There's not an exact dimension. We're just getting something that we can cut our lure in half with temporarily. Again, I like to make this one wire. And we are going to have this box. I'm going to rotate this so you can see what we're dealing with. We've got this volume of space here. We want it to go from right here, the middle of the furthest point back on your lure, and then figure out where that line tie is. Since we know that this is now 28, we need 14 and 14. When we cut this in half, we need 2 halves, 14 each. In order to make life easy, if we rotate this right now, everything rotates around the origin. So if we hit R, right, in the back there, it's no longer in the spot where we want it to start. We want it to start right there in the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this origin here, since it rotates around the origin. Go to Tool, Effect Only Origins, G. I'm gonna first put it on this corner. One thing we haven't talked about yet is snapping to vertex. So right here where this little magnet is, don't click the magnet. We don't want it lit up, but to drop down next to it, make sure this is on vertex. And what that will do is that will give us the ability to snap it to here when we hold down control. See, I hold down control, and where my cursor is, boom. So I want to snap it there, and then hit G. We're going to move it along the x-axis so that it stays right there along that edge. And we're going to drop it off right here. It doesn't got to be perfect. Just get it close. You know, if you want to zoom in and look at it and put it, well, I got it pretty good there. But now we want to turn that off. So unclick it. You can go back to item because we're done on that tab. Now when we rotate this cube, it's going to rotate along that point. So we are now creating a plane. I'll show you something cool. We're going to click our lure. We're going to add a modifier, generate Bulin. Make sure this says difference. Click on this little eyedropper, and then click on the lure, or click on this little box and go down and hit. I'm sorry, I had told you, click your eyedropper and then click on the lure. You don't want to do that. You want to click your eyedropper and then click on this cube. Or you can hit this little box here and go down the cube. Either way, it's going to cut it in half. It's going to remove the area that is inside this volume that we created. We can turn off our frame for right now. We don't need it. So since this box is rotating back there, when we rotate it, you see there's a plane that's cutting through our lure. Okay. So let's look at what we have. If this is 14, this top half is 14, then we're done with this part. So hit volume. We're pretty close. It's about half a cubic centimeter bigger than it needs to be. So we need more area. We will need more area on the volume. So since this is 14 and a half, the bottom's going to be 13 and a half. We need a little bit less area on the top, a little more area on the bottom. So we're going to rotate this up a little bit. We're going to move that line type position here. When you hit R and you go to rotate, you see where my little arrow cursors are way off to the left there? That gives me some control on moving it. If you're here and you hit R, you don't have the control there. What you can do, you can hold down Shift and it will give you also a little bit more control. We're going to go up a little bit. In the top left corner, you'll see a number there. It says rotation 0.13. So let's go with 0.16 and see what it's done for us. Click our lure body, hit volume. Okay, so that wasn't enough. So we need to go, let's hit rotate, and let's just make it a whole degree. And we're going to keep playing this game. Oh, it went too far. We're going to keep playing this game until we're at 14. So I'm going to undo that rotation, rotate. Let's make it half a degree. And volume. Too far again. So instead of going back and undo, we're going to just rotate to the left, which is negative. So that was half. Half was too far. Let's go down some more. Rotate negative 0.25. That's pretty close. You could keep going to, like, now we're gonna, since that was a quarter, we'll rotate, I don't know, 1/10 of a degree. See what that is. I mean, you can keep going till you dial this down to 14,000, but that's not a big, it's not that you're wasting your time. I'm going to do it here with you just for the sake of exercise, but it's a waste of time. There's going to be so many other variables impacting the lure that, like I said, you're wasting your time. Let's put it back to, let's just get it here and leave it with that. So we know that our line tie is going to be here. And you'll see that it's almost cutting that center of mass in half, which makes sense. So we want to leave the box here because we did it as a reference. But what we were going to do is we're going to turn off this Bulin modifier that we have. We're just going to close it and get rid of it. We don't need it anymore. Okay. So line tie here, line tie here. And it looks like it's a straight line, and it pretty much is. But if we had, that's just coincidence or luck or whatever. If we had our nose higher or our nose lower, then our center of mass would be in a different place, and then our areas for the top and the bottom would be different, and then our line tie would be at a different angle, yada yada yada. So this is what we got for now. And if you were going to create your own lure, like if you had drawn it out on paper, and I like to just do it in Blender from scratch, but if you were the kind of person who likes to draw it out on paper, I'll show you how that would work. Now you could do that just real quick. You need some good pictures of the side view. You need some good pictures of the front view. You need some pictures of the top view. So however you can place that lure on your table or whatever, on your camera phone, and on your phone camera, turn on the grid in the settings so that you can line it up and get a good view. I'm going to add some material to this real quick so that it would help stand out on what I'm about to show you. You don't need to do this. This is not something for you to do. This is going to help you understand something. Okay, I'm going to go down to material here. No, that was not material. I'm going to give this a color that'll help it not be white or gray. Okay. So, you're not going to be able to see it on my screen, but if you're in a newer version of Windows, there's a built-in tool for screenshotting or snipping it. If you're not in that, I'm going to kind of leave you to your own devices to figure this out. But if you wanted to copy this lure, exactly this lure, I'm going to turn these off for you. Make this as big as we can. Okay, so you're going to want to screenshot. Screen snip. Grab this as your side view. Something like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just make sure you get the whole lure. Save this in a place that you're going to be able to remember, like a desktop or something. And I'm going to call it lure.side. Okay. We need a front view, remember. Go ahead and just grab these off of my screen, or off of your screen. If you're wanting something to duplicate, a guide. We call this lure.front. And then we'll need the top view, remember? Okay. I'm going to hide this for right now just to show you something. So if you were starting with a brand new blank viewport, blank canvas, brand new Blender file, you hit Shift A, get that cube, just like we did at the very beginning. Switch back to inches, make life easier for me. Define your bounding box, change those dimensions to 3.71 and 0.681. These are the dimensions what we wound up with, our final dimensions of the lure. Again, go to the object panel, make it wire. Okay. Now, we want to bring those pictures in. So hit Shift A, not mesh. We've been using mesh, but let's go to image, go to reference. I had put them on the desktop. Lure side. It's huge again, right? It's all huge. So hit S to scale and bring it way down here. Oop, too far. So get it to where it fits into that box, in that frame. And what you want to do is, you don't, when you're making your lure, you don't want that in the middle of your lure. You don't want that in the, cutting your lure in half. So we're going to move it way to the back. Hit G to move, go straight to the Y axis, put it back here. Just put it way back there. No matter how far back you put it, because once you're in the Y view, it's going to look like it's right there. But if you rotate, dang it. Alright, let's try that again. Okay. If you rotate off of your lure, it's not going to be in your way. Alright, so that was the side. I'm sure you can figure out we're going to do the exact same things for the next ones. Shift A, image, reference. Let's bring in that. Hold on. Let's go ahead and hit X. So now we're on the front view. Now, let's bring in that front view. S to scale and bring it down. Well, you can zoom way in here and just nail it all perfect if that's what you want to do. Again, you can hold down Shift to kind of slow the constraint. Slow the scale or whatever it is. So it was a little off center. I moved it to the left. Same idea. Take it and move it G, X, move it way back there. Let's get our top view. Oof, I lost my, there we go. Okay. Shift A, image, reference. S. Now, you're not going to just scale it. You're going to need to move it around because it's off center. So G to grab, and move it along the X to get that left and right. We're going to go a little bit further since it needs to be scaled a little. And it's hanging off right here, and it's not touching up here. So we're going to move it along the Y. All right. Same idea. We're going to hit G, we're going to move it along the z-axis and just get it out of your way. So that now, when you are moving around your lure, they aren't in your way, but if you go to your certain view, they'll be there. And same idea. Take this, instead of adding another cube, if we want to take this frame, just hit Control D. We can duplicate the frame. We don't want to move it anywhere, so hit Escape. Turn this back into textured. We could have also just added another cube, and we would have had to re-enter the dimensions. So same as earlier. Oh, silly goose. I forgot I put on viewport shading earlier. Okay. Right, so same as earlier. Tab in there. Add your Control R and add your 6 loop cuts. Tab out. Add your subdivision surface modifier here. Crank it up. I don't need to go that far. And same idea, right? G, Z, oops, no, S, Z, and move those vertices around, those vertexes around until they line up. Also, don't forget that you'd want to do your mirror. You're still going to want to do your mirror modifier. So you want to go to Edit. You don't want to hit Auto Mirror along the Y. Same song and dance. You'll see that it's not as wide as that one was. That will change whenever you add those other 2 loop cuts on the side. So don't do it now, but when you get to the front view, if you added those other 2 loop cuts, now everything's making sense again, you know? All right. So the next thing that we'll be doing is, adding in our places for our hardware. Adding in holes for our ballast, determining our air pockets, determining our cutouts for our line ties, and I know this might not make sense right now, but that's going to be different if you're on a resin printer or you're on a FDM filament printer. It's because just the nature of how it prints, and if you need to have holes in the cavity to drain the resin, etc. We will get into that. In the next video, we will go through FDM first. Where to add the line tie, how to add the line tie, where to add the ballast, how to add the ballast. So that'll be part 2 in this series. And then we will go into Cura and, well, the slicer that I use, Cura. And you're going to have to slice it a certain way that's different than a normal 3D print. But we're going to cover all that in future videos. So look forward to seeing you all in the next one.